RIMS is global. Discover why 10,000 of your peers in more than 60 countries are part of the world's largest risk management community. Visit rims.org/membership to find the best membership for you and your organization. Coming to you from RIMS headquarters in New York, this is RIMScast, the official podcast of the Risk and Insurance Management Society. I am Justin Smulison, Business Content Manager here at RIMS and your proud RIMScast host. This is episode 397. It is our mid-year risk review, and we will be rejoined by Morgan O'Rourke and Hilary Tuttle. They are here to discuss the major trends shaping the risk landscape, what's happened so far in 2026, and what we can look forward to. But first, let's talk about some virtual workshops. The next RIMS CRMP exam prep with Parima will be held virtually July 21st and 22nd. Registration links are on this episode's notes. And we have a summertime webinar on July 16th. Zurich will present Too Hot to Ignore, Heat-Related Injuries and Workers' Compensation. Register at rims.org/webinars and via the link on this episode's show notes. Also on the webinars page, you will see a two-part series hosted by the RIMS membership department. The Classroom to Career webinar series highlights how RIMS equips students with the knowledge, skills, and connections needed to thrive in risk management careers. Participants will gain insights into industry trends, career pathways, and practical tools that help them confidently step into the evolving world of risk management after graduation. These sessions will be hosted on September 1st and 9th. These sessions are member exclusives and complimentary for members, of course. So if you are interested in becoming a member, this would be the time. Visit rims.org/membership. And we've got another popular virtual series to tell you about. Folks, you can enroll now in the RIMS CRO Certificate Program in Advanced Enterprise Risk Management hosted by the famous James Lam. Beginning July 15th, workshops will be held bi-weekly from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. A link to registration is on this episode's show notes. Speaking of ERM, the RIMS ERM Conference 2026 will be held November 19th and 20th in Columbus, Ohio. Registration will open in July. And be on the lookout for the call for nominations for the RIMS ERM Global Award of Distinction. Visit rims.org/ERM 2026 in July for that announcement. Folks, RIMS is back on YouTube. Our handle is at RIMS Official Channel. We've got plenty of videos there, including RIMScast, RIMScast Canada video podcasts, and other informative and entertaining content from RIMS. Subscribe to the channel today. We have more plugs later. Let's get on with the show. We are smack in the middle of the year, and that means that it's time for our mid-year risk review with two of my favorite people, Morgan O'Rourke, RIMS Vice President of Content and Publications, and Hilary Tuttle, the Managing Editor of RIMS Risk Management Magazine. They're joining us today to discuss some of the highlights of the Q2 edition of RIMS Risk Management Magazine, which is available now. We're going to talk hurricane preparedness, reputation red teaming, AI, and other emerging trends that risk professionals should be aware of, avoiding, and embracing. We're going to have a lot of fun. Let's get to it. Morgan O'Rourke and Hilary Tuttle, welcome back to RIMScast.
It is worth mentioning that we are not a large group in the publications department. We are a team of 5, I believe.
Yeah.
And I've been here 9 years. I'm still the second newest person. So that's pretty cool.
Because we all
look at that.
It's because we love each other. You were doing this on Zoom, and Zoom just randomly decided to throw some balloons in front of Justin.
Yeah.
That's when we should have the video going. Let's see.
Well, yeah, I can always splice that in there.
Yeah, right. Sure. People will love it.
So before we dive in, let's remind the audience what's the frequency with which they can find RIMS Risk Management Magazine. We got articles separate, and then you compile them for a special quarterly edition, right? Tell us what's going on.
That's exactly, pretty much got it. So yeah, we have articles go up every week. And then every quarter, we have a digital issue that's kind of reminiscent of a magazine, a physical magazine where you go, you've seen those digital issue PDFs where it flips the pages and everything and has
I love the
links all over the place and a table of contents. So yeah, every quarter we put that out. One just was released probably a week ago from when you're listening now, yesterday from when we're recording this. And then, there's some occasional special issues like on ERM and on the RIMS Awards that we give out at RISKWORLD. So those will pop in every so often.
We also send out editors' picks emails every month.
There you go.
With a selection of things that you may have missed on the website.
Yeah. Either new stuff or sometimes archival stuff that's still relevant,
we do some curation.
Timely, things like that. So it's not all just, here's the latest 5 articles. It's sometimes, here's the coolest, the most interesting. In fact, our picks, as the title editor's picks would suggest.
Right.
Look at us.
So you're keeping the readership engaged in all these different ways.
Try to be out there in the frequency and format that everybody can appreciate.
Do you miss the physical print?
Who doesn't?
Yes.
Hillary, you miss it?
Yes, I've got them right here. You can kind of see.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a bittersweet. Yeah. Sometimes if you think about it.
I think you've captured or maintained the essence of the print, though. You're very.
I hope so. I mean, that's kind of what the digital editions are meant to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of evoke that sort of traditional way of looking at an article.
That's why I like the flipping.
So, yeah. I mean, I'll admit as much as the next person, I'm probably 90% digital for most things, but it's still kind of fun to look at the old layout and all that sort of stuff to put on a magazine or book or whatever or what have you. The physical versions.
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily the way of everybody consumes things nowadays. So you got to be where everybody's attention is. So that's what we're trying to do.
Exactly. All right. Armored Saint has a song called The End of the Attention Span, and they open with it because
it's cool. That's a good pull. I feel like that's you and maybe one other person know who you're talking about.
It's totally making the cut also. So we've got the marquee article in the Q2 edition is Hilary's coverage of the 2026 hurricane season outlook. Now, Hilary, we know you from, like you were in a movie. We know you from a movie called Cybersecurity, but you're also very well versed in hurricane preparedness and seasonal outlooks. How does this year measure up to past ones?
Yeah, so it's always an interesting challenge to try to figure out how to make the weather seem different year to year. Mm-hmm. Particularly this year, a lot of the forecasts are calling for a below average season. So as a writer and an editor, you're kind of like, what's the angle? How do I make this interesting?
Yeah.
So this year we focused on some of the factors that are kind of complicating the season and what will make it different from other years. And it's not necessarily like a tremendous number of storms, at least from initial forecasts. It's really the challenge of the operating environment.
Right.
So we focus a lot on the macroeconomic volatility,
easy for you to say,
geopolitical instability, and U.S. federal budget cuts as some of the biggest complications this year that are making a really fragile and challenging recovery landscape. So we talk about increased prices in disaster materials or preparation materials, the general kind of inflation impact, supply problems from the war in Iran, and a really stretched federal support system that is kind of characterized by either defunding or dysfunction.
Right.
And what that will mean for risk managers who are tasked with hurricane preparation or recovery.
Right. So even if the physical hurricane isn't devastating, all these other factors can make its impact devastating.
Yeah. And I think it's also important to underscore, looking beyond the forecast, it's always important to assess how your resilience strategy is going to hold up in practice.
Yeah.
There's the cliche of like, it only takes one. And, I don't like to rely on that as a a reason that someone should care.
It's a cliche because it works, but
but it is a cliche because it's true.
Right. Sure.
And it is an environment where even a single landfall is going to be more expensive,
right?
Potentially, like the cost is going to be higher than ever. Whether that be because of your value at risk, or if it's because of the response materials being 40% more expensive, or things like that.
Yeah, because we had a risk engineer from Global Risk Consultants on the show recently, and we were talking about more the physical preparations, 48 hours, 36 hours, and 24 hours before an impact. And I feel like your perspective provides the aftermath. Okay, you've survived, but now you've got all these other issues to check out beyond just whether or not your warehouse is still standing.
There's definitely that.
Yeah.
It's also worth underscoring that, between material shortages and price increases, the supply chain is going to be potentially a huge problem for disaster preparation and response this year. And some of it is, with the Strait of Hormuz closed, getting things is difficult. And people are certainly seeing that across industries and across materials. But a number of response materials are also going to be more expensive because of the increased cost of oil. And that I thought was one problem that I was not necessarily fully aware of going in, but I found really interesting in reporting the piece. Obviously, like generator fuel, drastically more expensive than it has been in the past. And, kind of the best practice is to have 72 hours worth per generator on site if you're in like a high risk area. So that's going to be drastically more expensive than it was in the past. But some of the trickle down stuff in terms of like materials that require, we'll call it petrochemical inputs, include things like plywood and structural lumber. So boarding your windows is going to be more expensive than ever if you can get it.
Right.
The transport costs are obviously going to be drastically more. Heavy duty plastic sheeting, plastics are all kind of petrochemical related products. And some of these also use byproducts of the crude oil production. So polymers and petroleum derivatives and plastics. So like the rubber seals that you might use, things like that, all of those are going to be drastically more expensive because they fluctuate as crude oil fluctuates.
Yeah. Buy it in bulk now while you can.
Yes.
Kind of comes. Well, also the idea is you have to prepare for those increased costs.
Yeah.
You may have insurance that you may think, well, that'll cover it, but you may find yourself underinsured for the actual cost of those materials that you may have budgeted for or insured for in the beginning. So that's sort of like be aware of the increased costs. Do what you can beforehand to, whether it's increase your policy coverage or, like Justin said, buy more in bulk. But the idea being that if you're going to face increased costs, the more you can do beforehand to offset those costs is probably for the better. Yeah.
Yeah. I did put together like a 10 tips.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. It's great. Yeah.
And we try to go for things that are a lot more detailed and also more useful than just the standard, like have batteries, some of that stuff. And one of the ones that I bumped up the list is specifically to revisit your insured values and your current policy limits, because I do think that the risk of underinsurance is worth underscoring this year. It is going to be drastically more expensive to rebuild, and making sure that you have the coverage that you need to cover those expenses and to cover the expenses of potentially needing to relocate during, if things are closed. Car parts are also drastically more expensive. So for people who operate fleets, it's worth noting that, all of those metals are delayed and pricier. Partially because of tariffs and partially because of supply chain problems. It's also worth noting that, we just had Tropical Storm Arthur come through last week, and it never reached hurricane strength, but it still managed to do $4 to $6 billion in damage, according to like initial estimates from AccuWeather.
Billion.
And, yes, billion with a B. So surprising. Hit the Gulf Coast, and, it did do a lot of damage in terms of business interruption, delayed flights, extended power outages, things like that. So it does underscore kind of some of the business continuity issues and the losses there. But it also underscores like it doesn't need to be a hurricane to do a tremendous amount of damage. And AccuWeather, I thought, made a great point when they pointed out that like the hurricane classification system is solely based on wind speed. But wind is one of the least, I don't want to say entirely irrelevant, but like it does not do as much damage as water.
Right.
And that's not measured by hurricanes. So storm surge and flooding and inland flooding and things of that nature, like all of those water damages are not reflected in a hurricane classification. So we shouldn't just be concerned if it does reach hurricane strength. It's really worth underscoring that the peril and the need for preparation are just as dramatic for other storms.
I also think it's kind of interesting that, it's storm season started June 1st, technically, and you immediately have $1 billion potential damage within a week or so.
It's one of the earliest that we've seen.
Yeah. So a lot of I was going to say, like a lot of the timelines are necessarily either they're straight on point or it's just like every You usually think more in the fall, September, October is when it's really going to ramp up.
Yeah, no, but it's extended.
I mean, you've seen some years where it's been before. There's been some tropical storms before the season, but to be right on point like that just felt very interesting.
A lot of the conversations that I've had with risk engineers and such is that there's no such thing as the hurricane season anymore. It's basically just the hurricane year, and that's it.
Yeah.
Well, and not only that too. There's it's not necessarily confined to the Atlantic coast. You have Pacific storms to take into account. Notably,
I was really proud that when I put that one in there, Morgan messaged me when he read my draft. He's like, "I learned about a new thing. I didn't know Pacific storms are a problem."
Well, and so Hilary played that.
And it's worth noting that between my handing in a draft and us editing it and laying it out, there were 3 Pacific hurricanes that did form. So I had to frantically update this.
The Super El Nino was one, right?
Well, the Super El Nino is the general climate pattern that's going to create a lot of these storms in the Pacific. So you get more activity in the Eastern Pacific and less in the Atlantic. It's because of warmer waters in the Pacific and then more trade winds in the Atlantic. They kind of act to break up storm formation, but you get more stuff on the West Coast or in the Pacific. So parts of Central America, Mexico, and the West Coast are going to be at increased risk. Hawaii as well.
Hilary, have you ever considered changing your title here at RIMS to Chief Meteorologist?
I have not, but I did. I did work with a dude who it was one of his primary hobbies.
I feel like in the month of May and June, which he's writing this, that would be a temporary title. But also, speaking of the Pacific storms, I thought it was pretty amusing to me, at least, that one of the more impactful storms on the Pacific was named Hilary in 2023. So, Hilary's
in the article, the section is learn from another Hilary.
So it's not only is she the meteorologist, but she is the namesake. The namesake of an storm.
I will point out that she also was a $1 billion storm. And she killed 3 people, which is tragic, but it's just enough to know that she meant it.
Yeah.
Without truly being.
I do remember when that storm came through, because every time I saw it, every time there was a news headline about Hilary doing something, I just kept thinking of our Hilary as opposed to the storm. And it made me kind of smile,
it's
even though it
correctly too. Yeah. 1L.
There you go.
Yeah.
Very good.
So.
Yeah. Hilary's don't do things by half measures.
Not to make light.
Exactly. But Hilary's do not do things by half measures.
No, they do not.
To steal her line that she just said.
Yeah.
Let's take a quick break and talk about all the fantastic RIMS events coming up in 2026. The annual Florida Educational Conference will be held July 28th through August 1st, once again at the lovely Ritz-Carlton in Naples, Florida. A link to the event is on this episode's show notes. And you can register now for the 2nd annual RIMS Texas Regional Conference, which will be held August 10th through the 12th at the wonderful Grand Hyatt on the San Antonio Riverwalk. The 11th annual Chicagoland Risk Forum will return to the old post office on Thursday, September 24th. Visit chicagolandriskforum.org for more information. The RIMS Western Regional Conference will be held October 4th through the 7th in Seattle, Washington. The agenda is live and registration is now open. Visit rimswesternregional.com and the link on this episode's show notes for more information. And save the dates, October 18th through the 21st. We will be in Quebec City to celebrate the 50th live RIMS Canada Conference. Booth sales are open and sponsorship opportunities are still available. And advanced registration is open now. Visit rimscanadaconference.ca for more information. And also remember to check out rims.org/Canada for our spin-off show, RIMScast Canada, hosted by National Conference Committee Chair Aaron Luconi. And as we said at the top, the RIMS ERM Conference 2026 will be held November 19th and 20th in Columbus, Ohio. Registration opens in July, and be on the lookout for an announcement about submissions for the RIMS Global ERM Award of Distinction. Visit rims.org/ERM 2026. And now let's return to our interview with RIMS Risk Management Magazine's Hilary Tuttle and Morgan O'Rourke.
We got to talk about now it's kind of like the artificial intelligence. We got to talk about it because that's what's on people's minds, right? It's emerged beyond a technology issue and evolved into a data governance and operational risk challenge in part of a script that I definitely didn't write. So in your opinions, what are the top AI-related concerns for risk managers? Because we talk about this a lot on webinars, but I want to get your take on it.
I mean, a lot of times I look at AI and the first reaction is that, what else can we say about this? Because there is a little bit of burnout. I think that's one of the things that happens is because you hear all this AI stuff, and I think at a certain point, you've been inundated with, here's all the potential risks.
Yeah.
And then here's a bunch of products.
We also do get so many articles that are like AI for X, just like fill in the
here's
blank.
a bunch of products that are just AI related. And so it starts to get to a point where it's like, well, is this even worth paying attention to? Is there anything that's really worth getting into? And so sometimes it's just kind of like the same old. But it doesn't reduce the fact that there does need to be attention paid to, your AI use policies. If you're kind of doing something like that, well, how are your employees using AI? Are they introducing risk into your environment? Because even though we may have discussed this stuff ad nauseum, it doesn't mean it's not happening. So there was a study that we cited in the issue, a bunch of ISACA, which I believe, I don't remember the acronym, but I know it's it's a security and cybersecurity related. I'm going to mess that up because I hear the ISACA people somewhere in the audience going, you don't know our acronym, but I don't. I forgot. I'll get it before the end of it all. But, it's still, some of the biggest risks they're still seeing would be stuff like misinformation and disinformation. But at the same time, they also don't necessarily consider themselves, the IT people, or their companies necessarily prepared to identify those risks, at least not across the board. So it doesn't mean that these things that we've discussed aren't relevant.
In an ISACA poll of more than 3,400 IT professionals, 90% of respondents said that employees are using AI in their organization. However, risk recognition is lagging, with only 45% of respondents saying AI risks are an immediate priority and 38% saying they are confident in their board's understanding of and action against AI risks. There's more, but I'm running out of gas.
That's exactly what I was getting at.
Yeah. And, you're seeing a lot of shadow AI use. You're seeing a lot of unlicensed and unsanctioned use.
What's an unsanctioned use? Give us an example.
So if your organization says, like, we don't want you using AI, or if they say, here's Copilot, but they make no other provisions, but you're out here using ChatGPT and Gemini and, a million other things, like those are not necessarily sanctioned uses.
Right.
And dropping the entire, whatever report in that might be proprietary information to, distill that into a public environment. That's the actual use itself, not just the fact you open up the program, but the stuff you're putting into it, maybe, stuff that no one would want out.
It's worth noting there also was a recent study that 90% of organizations have employees who regularly use personal AI tools for work. 40% of companies have purchased official subscriptions to some of these services, and that is really what you should be doing because you get different privacy protections than you do if you don't. But the other 50% are running on shadow AI. They're either letting employees basically foot the bill by using their personal subscriptions, or you're using free models, and that's a disaster. And one of the things that a lot of organizations aren't thinking about is the cost of all of those subscriptions and all of the tokens that get used. A lot of companies that are starting to adopt this stuff at large scale and that are footing that bill are running into these astoundingly large bills for these services and not factoring in like, oh, this is not free computing power. This is not a free tool. And particularly now that some of these companies are going for IPO, it's not going to stay free, even if it is free.
Right. Yeah. Like Netflix or like Roku. Yeah. Well, that's it. That's my contribution there. Those are the risks that we should, those are the risks that should be paid attention to that are flying under the radar, right?
To an extent, I think the reason why I would say some of it might fly under the radar is because it sort of feels like we've already discussed it. So it's one of those things. It's almost like a reminder that just because it's not necessarily something you want to hear the 15th time doesn't mean it shouldn't be doing something about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think hidden cost is a big one. That people really aren't thinking about. Thinking about governance, and that is incredibly important. And interestingly, like the market for that is unfortunately also booming. So people have a very vested interest in making you just as afraid of it as they do hawking it to you in the first place. I mean, the governance market is going from like 200 something million 2 years ago to an estimated, like, I think it was $3 or $4 billion by 2037. Like it's a huge industry to make you dependent on AI and then to charge you to rule it or to govern it or to make it safer. But we're also starting to see a lot more studies that are finding company after company made these huge investments in AI and they're not seeing ROI of any kind.
Right.
So there was a recent one that 5% of organizations have had transformative returns from AI investment. The other 95 said there is zero measurable impact on profit and loss, if not being a net negative.
Right.
They're just like, you're not getting money from it. I think one CEO said that unless it's for coding specifically, you are not going to get money, like monetary value out of AI whatsoever. And a lot of companies that have fired people are starting to reverse course really quickly. We're also seeing companies that make AI who are walking back a lot of their claims about how transformative it's going to be. The CEOs of OpenAI and Anthropic have officially walked back a lot of their claims. They said that there was going to be a job apocalypse because widespread job automation was going to be so easy. They're walking those claims back. The COO of Uber said that gains in productivity were absolutely nothing compared to the increased AI-related expenses that they're experiencing. So they're walking back a lot of their investment. And the former chief of AI at Microsoft said that employees, default to automating tasks that are ones they dislike rather than ones that create value, and that bill is coming. So it's, I think, worth discussing, like, where is this?
I think it's probably, it speaks to being practical about what you're going to get out of it, as opposed to it being some sort of like magic button to press. I mean, I hate to paint this as these people that are like, pre-internet takeoff going, oh, that internet's going to go nowhere. AI is not going to go nowhere. It's just that there is, in the early going of anything, there's always this
finding
kind of
its footing.
Exactly. There's this kind of spike in like promise versus reality. And I think we're at a point where the promise has peaked, reality is kicking in. It does not mean it's going to be like tossed aside like, some .com bubble back in the 90s or whatever, or 2000s.
I do think there's a hype bubble around it in terms of, we're seeing AI for everything, and we're seeing all of these claims that like AI is going to replace everyone. And we're seeing companies that are laying off. I mean, last year, 125,000 tech workers lost their jobs. And this year, it's the end of June. We've already had 120,000. They're looking to already beat that by July. We are seeing huge kind of overinflated promise of what AI is going to be. And I think people are very slowly starting to realize it is to augment employees. It's not to replace them.
Right. Well, I think that's kind of important too, because when you get right down to it, there's still a lot of push for the human in the loop part, which says that a lot of people have come to recognize that we can't leave the people out of this, if only to just check accuracy of results. But it's the idea that, you can't replace workers because there's stuff that the AI can't do. As Hilary always loves to remind me, AI is going to always tell you what you want to hear. Doesn't necessarily, and it's always going to give you stuff it's a predictive engine. So it's always going to kind of give you stuff that's already out there. It's not necessarily creating new information. It's just distilling it differently. So
and I do think that's a really important core competency that people need to be developing right now. Taking a quick look at a thing and being like, oh, that makes sense, like done, is really not an adequate amount of oversight to be providing for things that you're using AI for, particularly as you start using it for more and more stuff. AI is structured to give you things that it thinks you want or to kind of predict what you would do.
Right.
And so it's not hard to imagine a situation where you're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense, or like that seems well written, but you don't necessarily pay enough attention to what's actually in there or whether it makes sense. And we see this sometimes in people who try to like submit things too. It restates. It doesn't actually like explore ideas. And you need to be really giving it more than a look to approve it. You need to be giving it a look to assess it and a look to truly analyze what it is doing before you're putting stuff forward. And
well, you bring up a really interesting point that I was going to ask you. And that's, as the gatekeepers of the editorial integrity of our magazine, RIMS Risk Management Magazine, rmmagazine.com, always be promoting. What are you looking for in submissions about AI articles?
So, to be very clear, we do not accept articles that are written with AI.
Right. There's that part. Yeah.
We've definitely
started with that. Yeah.
We've definitely received submissions that people don't necessarily seem to get that.
Right. And there's ways to check for that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's also something that, there's an art to it because it is meant to replicate humans. So it's tricky, but we do have a very firm policy on that.
Right.
When it comes to stuff about AI, we've seen pretty much everything that you could make. So it's a little tricky.
I think that's where I was talking about the burnout is on our side too, where it's kind of like, as Hilary said at some point earlier, she said something like, we see where you get a ton of articles about here's AI for X, like, and just change
here's
X
AI
to like
for audit.
this
Here's
industry.
AI
and
for fraud detection.
And it's the same
AI
article. Right. It's the same article.
But if somebody gave you but if somebody gave you something about here's where the ROI has been.
I mean, I would probably be interested in practical use cases that aren't promotional. If there's such a thing that somebody's found some success in using AI that their colleagues could benefit from as well. Not something that's so proprietary that it only works for our company, but something that this is where AI might be able to help risk managers in general. I think that a lot of people are using it for a lot of different things. So there's not necessarily this is the only best practice, but in order to establish a kind of list of best practices, those are the stories that I think will help us along that route of getting from promise to reality by establishing that here's a few things that AI has been very effective for in the risk management process.
I think it's also helpful to get stuff that has practical guidance on what they're using that is useful in terms of, the governance piece. So how are you crafting policies that are effective? How are you working to train your workforce on best practices so that they're using AI responsibly and getting the most out of it? How are you exploring the ideas of customization if that's something that your company is doing in-house? A lot of these more practical things. And then we're also seeing some that are kind of legal exposure and how a lot of that is shaping up since all of the case law is so nascent. What are the exposures that you're necessarily thinking of, or what are the liabilities that other organizations are learning in real time that you can kind of start guarding against?
I mean, at this point, a lot of that stuff, as Hilary said, there's a lot of cases working through, so there's not necessarily precedent immediately, but some of these things will become that. And that's the sort of thing. Knowing what the risks are out there, if there's new ones that we haven't thought of. We ran through the 3 or 4 years ago. Everybody was talking about the basic general risks. Now specific risk of applications and things like that. Yeah,
let's get granular.
Yeah, that's really what it comes down to: is how do you do this for real as opposed to theory.
There are also interesting costs of it, and I think that is something again that is underexplored and would be interesting to read about. Our companies seeing that it's particularly having an impact in a particular area that they didn't anticipate. I mean, even like if you think of OpenAI, they have had, I think, over 100 million at this point in money that is simply as a result of people saying please and thank you to ChatGPT, because the GPUs that are used every time there is a prompt, it adds up. And so they're spending millions upon millions of dollars just to process that you said thank you to the AI.
But you don't want to make the AI angry.
Yeah. Well, so I also read a really interesting study.
Yeah, might come for you.
Included that I think it was like 80% of people are doing it because they don't want to make the AI angry. And then the other 18% were just like, it's just the right thing to do.
I'm one of the 80%.
Well, and I do it as well, but I make a point of including it within my last prompt, not after. So it's not a separate line item that has to be processed.
Well, because
I care about the earth.
You care about the earth.
It conserves water.
Interestingly, they have also said that certain AI platforms actually perform better when you do talk to them politely. So like ChatGPT will give you more kind of coherent, nicer, and like more polished answers if your input is more polite.
Yeah, that's funny. I feel like
so. I guess in a way they're also like creating their own problem. You have to be polite, but then it costs money to be polite.
Whenever the last time you watch the Terminator movies will directly affect how polite you are to the AI, perhaps.
I mean, you want to be polite, but you don't want to be empowering.
Wow, that's a good one. Put that on the t-shirt.
I was watching this really interesting video from a conference from the American Psychological Association. And this professor from Michigan State was talking about how like the underappreciated risk or problem with AI is, we talk about how like one of the upsides is that you can automate all of the like mundane or like boring or easy stuff. And she's saying that's actually a huge problem, because when you automate the parts that are easy, that means that 100% of your job is now the parts that are hard. or that are difficult or that are stressful. And that is a guaranteed ticket to burnout. Like you've made the easy wins and the like low level stuff that your brain needs to recover part of your job that is no longer relevant. Like you don't get to do those little breaks or those little bits.
Easy
and so everything
wins.
is complicated, difficult, exhausting. And that's not how the brain is designed to function.
Nor
That
is
is
it
fascinating.
nor is it how we wanted AI to be in the first place. You didn't want AI to do the fun stuff or like the
It's
easy
not even
stuff.
about fun, but like if you think about like with customer service, like think
Yeah.
about a call center. If it's just a simple thing where it's like, what time are you open? Or, you know, like, do I have a warranty? Those are things that you can close quickly and easily. But if you're dealing with people who are like furious at you and it's a 20-minute conversation of them like yelling at you, and that's all you do all day, every day, what is your life going to be like?
Stressful after stress
Plus,
after
you
stress.
then also start like, you know, put things on hold for a while because you're just like, I need a second to be able to get back to this. And if your goal was efficiency in the first place, like you're not making it more efficient. You're adding more buffer time because you can't handle that all the time. So, fun fact.
There you go. That's a fun fact.
Fun fact. All
I
right.
enjoy psychology moments.
Who doesn't? Who doesn't love a good psychology?
We will take one more quick break. The Spencer Educational Foundation's Funding Their Future Gala will be held September 17th in New York City at the famous Waldorf Astoria. This year, Spencer will honor Sierra Signorelli of Zurich and our recent guest, Mariah Propus of RT Specialty. A link to the gala is on this episode's notes. Let's talk about the openings and deadlines for various Spencer Educational Foundation programs and grants. We have reached the deadline for Risk Manager on Campus submissions. Grant awardees, colleges and universities are typically notified in September. General grants are open and the application deadline is July 30th. And internship grant applications open on August 15th and close on October 15th. Links to each of these grants are on this episode's show notes. And of course, you can visit spencered.org for more information. And let's conclude our interview with Morgan O'Rourke and Hilary Tuttle of RIMS Risk Management Magazine.
And so we are back with Morgan O'Rourke and Hilary Tuttle. They have released the Q2 issue of RIMS Risk Management Magazine, and you can flip the pages digitally. And there's an article about red teaming. What's red teaming?
What's red teaming?
And why isn't it called A teaming? And why doesn't Mr. T just blast through?
Well, I think it's probably the military.
Whoa.
And if you know things about the A-team was being hunted by the military. So I think they wouldn't necessarily want to name an exercise they do against their adversary. But regardless of what Mr. T was doing in the 80s, red teaming is really just basically, you know, if you're trying to do some sort of, what do you call it, like a crisis evaluation or like a simulation. Yeah, you have to have a team that is the adversary, the one that acts as your like devil's advocate or your opponent to challenge all of your assumptions, to challenge all of your plans. That's their entire goal.
Immersive exercises that involve some form of offense and defense. And it's basically the same as wargaming.
Yeah. I promised Charlie I would ask the question as Jiminy Glick because he loves Jiminy Glick.
Is that what that was?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
What's red teaming? Like
that is actually a pretty good Jiminy Glick. So good for you. I'll give you that.
That's another outdated reference and impression I can do.
Justin does love them. You are good at them.
Yeah.
So yeah,
they are war games that are teeming with opportunity.
Finally, Hilary plays along with the pun game.
I love a good pun.
You're like,
well, you know, so there we go. That's what red teaming is. It's a lot of Jiminy Glick, A-team, war games. Oh yeah, war games. That's the real one.
Right. I can't make A-team references, so I apologize. I'm
that's
out of
okay.
on that.
Not even the movie, which was underrated and made no sense.
No, I'm sorry, I can't.
Bradley Cooper was in it. Come on.
I mean, that's nice.
That's the best reaction to Bradley Cooper or Liam Neeson. I believe Liam Neeson was in it too. Yeah. So there's Anyway.
Well, the feature on reputation red teaming suggests that organizations need to prepare, like hurricanes, for the first 48 hours. In this case, it's the 48 hours of a crisis as much as the crisis itself. So, with that in mind, what is social media's influence on reputation risk and red teaming?
Go ahead, Hilary.
Go ahead, Morgan.
I don't know what I was going to say. Yeah, every time he says red teaming that way, it kind of throws me off. But social media, yeah. So social media is going to amplify the impact of a crisis, and especially immediately. I mean, think about all the things you see online that are like knee-jerk reactions to anything that's happening. And if you lose track of that as a company, if you kind of lose control of the narrative, people are telling a story that maybe isn't your story, isn't accurate, isn't anything. I was speaking of AI, thinking of this before. There was just a story that came that my wife was telling me an anecdote she saw that Jeff Bezos at some point said that we should be using water for AI purposes rather than human consumption because AI will solve more problems. And it sounds like a crazy Matrix level insanity, but it turns out he never said that. Now, it's not necessarily a crisis, but that's the point of, social media amplifies something beyond the point to which gets legs before people even think to like question its validity.
Right.
A bigger reputation crisis might be the fact that 100% sounds like a legitimate thing he would have said.
That's true. And I had to tell her that, and that was her response as well. She's like, yeah, but it sounds like it could be said. Because
he gave that crazy interview recently.
But we're in an environment where crazy, more often than not, sounds
crazy is becoming the norm.
Well, and sometimes it's not, right?
Social media really is a force multiplier for a lot of that stuff, particularly now that there are like zero content moderation controls on Twitter. It is a cesspool of misinformation, disinformation, and hate speech. So, a lot of things that you are not in control of and that are not necessarily true do run really rampant very quickly.
And a lot of social media is like that. Even if there is moderation, there's the chance that something is going to go up that stays up for a certain amount of time before it gets moderated. There's an instantaneous ability to post anything wild. And you don't like I said, the Bezos thing is all, all over Snopes and all that stuff. That's not true. But how many people follow up a story like that after they see the headline? And they may have seen it once. They may not even know where they saw it. Was it on LinkedIn? Was it on Facebook? Was it on Twitter or X? Whatever. It just becomes part of the stuff that floods into your brain. So, the whole point of trying to throw these exercises together is to acknowledge the fact that you need to have, not only do you need to have a plan, but the plan has to be in place to be able to move quickly. Yeah. Because, when it comes to a crisis that happens within your organization, oftentimes the biggest part of it is that, one of the bigger parts of it is the reputation elements people run with and just say, not only was this a bad thing a company did or a questionable thing, but like they're terrible for it. And we're just going to, they're irredeemable.
Right.
In the narrative.
Yeah. And if in the first, 12 hours after something starting to make conversation on the internet, if people can't verify that because you haven't put out a statement on it, because you weren't ready or because you're waiting to see or because whatever, that means that you're entirely missing out on any opportunity to correct that misinformation and to be the part of the narrative that actually is steering that conversation.
You think about the attention spans people have anyway. If they see that headline, they're going to move on to the next headline within minutes. Yeah. And your first impression in that case, maybe the only impression you're ever given. I know it sounds borderline cliche in somewhere in there, but you know what I mean. So that's the issue you're running, is that you have to be on these things pretty quickly and make sure that you have the people in place and the plans in place. And, it's good in an exercise to make sure you have people who are poking holes in it. You're right.
Well, it's a good article because the author, Ted Skinner, is giving you actionable takeaways.
Justin's pop culture, improvs.
Yeah.
Legendary.
Yeah.
There's this woman on Instagram that I really enjoy who was like, I'm so tired of being in meetings where people make like sports analogies. But she was like, what if we start making makeup related analogies? And then
lay the foundation for those.
Yes, exactly. You're not going for a full red lip right off the bat. You're not going without liner. You're not doing a correction.
There's different shades to every perspective.
You don't want to cover up all of your flaws.
We can roll with it.
I don't know. That wasn't.
We live with women who wear makeup.
You're going for full coverage on a skin tint budget.
See, Hilary's got us beat. So
it is a good article, and I'm glad it's in there. I had admittedly never seen red teaming before, and
it's very common in cybersecurity,
right?
But yeah, it was the first time we'd really run across it in other applications, so that also kind of set that one apart for us.
Right, and as I looked it up, also on the interwebs, I saw that it's in the middle of the diagram is a red team, a team in red. So it's not lost
they're the
on
one
me.
that stands out. I think red is often the danger color. So that's,
yes, of course.
You're going to put a color to every team. Why not make the adversary be the red one?
Exactly. Yeah. So let's also discuss. Okay. So this is something that kind of is woven throughout our discussion today. Human behavior. It's in the issue that is out now, and it's also still permeating every risk that we have discussed and everything that's out there, right? We're saying you can't just let AI do your job for you. You have to put human perspective and input into it. Human behavior also is impacting employee misconduct. And that was a big article that we ran a few times in Weekend Read because we knew we were getting some traction with it, because that's something that is on the minds of risk professionals and executives. So how are organizations recognizing culture as a risk management issue?
Well, I think if you think about culture, to me, like, culture's probably like, it's a good stopgap to have if you can't be everywhere at once as say a risk manager to manage you can't see everything in everybody's operation. So if you have a risk aware culture, it can sort of be in the places and stand in for when you're not around. This analogy is tough, but you know what I mean? It allows everyone to be aware of risk so that you don't have to be the only person as a risk professional.
I'll give you a skincare analogy.
Go
for it.
Culture is your sunscreen. It's your everyday.
There you go.
It's your automatic. It's the thing that you need to do to prevent the majority of photoaging and skin cancer. Whereas, some of the more subject-specific areas are your serums. You're going to spot treat your hypopigmentation. You're going to treat redness. You're going to do whatever else. It depends on what your specific skin is like. Are you focusing on wrinkles? Are we working on adding antioxidants? What are we going to do? But the sunscreen is the thing that every single day you need to be doing, because it does cover the vast majority of problems.
It's a dermatological issue.
It is.
Well, see, and if you consider the dermis to be the entire organization, then there's your analogy right there, right?
Well, it is the largest organ.
It is the largest organ.
Oh, it's too bad I already titled this episode Mid-Year Roundup because this would have just been called the dermis.
The dermis. That's great. That's great. Well, I mean, you mentioned culture, you mentioned the human element. I think it's the human element is always it's necessary to interweave into all of this, because events are kind of largely out of your control, but the things you can control, like some of these larger events, geopolitical events, or storms and things like that, you can't stop these things from happening, but you can control some of the stuff on the ground. You can't control whether or not you put the sunscreen on.
Yeah.
You can control whether or not you have plans in place for any sort of disaster. That's the stuff that allows you to have a little bit of sleep at night, I guess, is the thing. Feel like you can at least do something in an environment where it feels like nothing can be done that can get overwhelming. I
think that's a great point. And part of overcoming that overwhelm is also the empowerment that comes with educating yourself, and doing the work in terms of, you can't control geopolitical risk on a large scale. What you need to figure out is what does that mean for your supply chain? What does that mean for your costs of whatever materials? And those are the things that it takes time, and it's not necessarily glamorous to look up, how much asphalt do we use in a year? But the stuff that keeps all of the gravel together in asphalt is a byproduct of oil production and drastically increases in price. So what is that going to mean for your organization? Or what does it mean if your supply chain for, X materials is going to be drastically delayed? Those are the ways that you can empower yourself. And those are the ways that you make a difference within your organization with some of these big kind of ephemeral risks.
That's the way people have to think about polycrisis and business continuity. I feel like
you need
Hilary
to think
summed
about
it up
what does
right
this
there.
mean for us. And one of the things that we evaluate really often with articles, and that is probably the single most common edit note that I give, or the most common assessment I give on submitted articles, is so what? Yes, that's an interesting risk, or maybe it is a risk, period. A lot of them are not interesting. That's fine.
Depends on what you find
but what does it mean for you, or what do you do about it, or what consequence does this have to your organization?
Right.
Those are the questions where that's the distinction between an article that I read and an article that I publish. And those are the distinctions between a risk manager who is informed and a risk manager who is empowered.
There you go. There's our visualizer right there too. Hilary's got the bites.
She does.
This
She's got the
time
sound
around.
bites. She's got the sound bites today. I like it.
The bites.
Prepared. What can I say?
It's good.
Yes.
It's good.
She didn't bring any cookies, but she's got the bites.
Jesus.
That got the laugh. The joke I would have used on my 9-year-old. All right. So here's the big question. Based on the news, information, and perspective in this issue, as well as what you heard and saw at RISKWORLD 2026, what action or actions should risk managers take before the end of 2026? Let's stop there, digest.
Well, I guess it depends on where you're coming from. I think there's, we were talking about a lot of this stuff now, a lot of the idea of planning, understanding where risks exist for you, as opposed to the, breaking it down, as Hilary was saying before, breaking it down to the things you can control and paying attention to those sorts of things, looking at where all of these big picture things intersect your business. So a lot of times that'll come down to strengthening your fundamental risk management practices. Or and not to say ignoring these bigger issues, but to make sure you don't lose sight of the basics too at the same time. There's some talk of the insurance market softening, the property market particularly. So that might give you a little bit more freedom or funds to kind of invest in training or invest in infrastructure improvements that you might have been putting off, or at the very least, just reassess your policies and terms and conditions and kind of see if you can't take advantage of pricing in that sort of sense. It's kind of, those are the basic fundamentals of risk management, but in a time when everything is crazy, when there's when the polycrisis, even though that word is sort of overused, when it's a polycrisis environment, sometimes that's really, to me, that feels like the thing that you're going to have to do, because it's just, otherwise it will get too crazy. I think otherwise it's too crazy to look at all the big stuff. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think focusing on more localized impacts, whether that be, the impact of the supply chain disruption to your business, or a storm to your business, or inflation to your business. Also working on your own skill set in terms of, we were discussing earlier, really learning how to have a critical eye when it comes to how you're using AI, and if you're using AI and what it's being used for. Fun fact, there's a 56% wage premium for workers with AI skills, according to PwC. A lot of those self-improvement and education things are critical to doing your job well now, but they also do obviously set you up to be more prepared career-wise. I think also, one area that I tried to touch on a little bit in the hurricane forecast was thinking about what some of these impacts also do to your workforce. AI certainly is a tremendously stressful and confusing one for your workforce. So redirecting some of that money, as Morgan mentioned, into training programs is a great option for that, in terms of you have a better workforce and they feel better. Studies do show that the more training you offer, the less resistance you usually get when it comes to tool integration. And the better outcomes. When it comes to storm season, also thinking about the fact that you're dealing with astounding inflation, but so are your workers. And if they can't afford plywood to board up their houses, that is also a problem. If they are displaced, you have a displaced workforce, and that means business interruption. So what can you do to assist? Is that ordering things in bulk so that, you have some purchasing power to help them obtain supplies? Is that providing emergency kits so that, they are prepared at home and you have a more prepared workforce that it hopefully comes back to work sooner, things like that. Think small when the big stuff is a little too big.
Yeah. So what should risk professionals avoid?
I don't know. It's a tough question.
It's a tough one.
It really will probably depend on your business, but I mean, I think we're kind of, it's the other side of the coin of what we're talking about here is, avoid getting distracted by headlines that maybe don't have as much relevance.
Going all in on emerging technology?
Perhaps. I mean, really everybody's risk appetite is going to be different for the emerging stuff. I think it really, it does, again, come down to educating yourself to know what works for you. If you just kind of take things on faith, that perhaps is not going to be fit for purpose for you. So,
yeah, I mean, I think a wait and see approach with a lot of emerging technology is definitely proved the best force. And if that's a decision that you're facing is the course of action that I would recommend. Do focus again on the augmenting employees, not replacing employees aspect of it. It is worth noting that like 50% of AI layoffs are going to be reversed by 2027.
Right.
According to Gartner. A lot of people who did act really fast and cut people because they overestimated how much AI was going to make an impact are going to be hiring those people back, and probably for more money, not to mention like recruiting costs or things like that. Some people are calling it like a layoff boomerang. It's coming back. And so I think, those who are not overly hasty are the ones who will be faring better in the long run. And that's an important lesson to keep in mind when it comes to making some of these assessments going forward as well.
I feel like that's a trend that's going to define the year, like you're suggesting. Is there anything else that you think might also have an asterisk next to 2026?
I mean, if you thought about it right now, nobody would have said, oh yeah, we're going to have a war that's going to dominate all of the headlines and, be that sort of, you wouldn't have predicted
or that it would
that.
be with Iran. Like if you told me there was a war, it wouldn't have been my first guess.
Right. So, I mean, so you think about that and you think, we're just starting storm season. We're anticipating it being a mellow storm season. Doesn't mean it will be.
Right.
It's the nature of the game that there's a lot of unanticipated things, or you don't know what to anticipate.
I think also, relief in some areas, but surging risk in others, like a dry hurricane season. Also, El Nino years come with increased dryness, which means increased wildfire risk. So it's always something. It's either flooding or it's burning. Which you'd prefer is largely subjective. But it's always something.
Yeah, I think this is one of those years where, it's pretty apparent that that it's just tough to predict anything because every day's something new. Yeah. Which is what keeps risk management interesting as far as I'm concerned.
It is, yeah.
And Morgan's been here since 1979. So,
right. So if I'm still interested, God only knows the rest of you, the folks that are actually doing the work, just must be having a party.
Yeah. Well, it's been great to have you rejoin us. It's always fun. These are some of my favorite episodes to produce. And remind everyone where to go. rmmagazine.com, right?
You got it. Go there.
Indeed.
Who gets the turn the page edition?
RIMS members do get the turn the page edition, but you can view a lot of the articles online. They're available for everyone.
And the awards edition is on rmmagazine.com. There's a special button for it.
That is true. That's also available through the RIMS website as well. In the rims.org/awards, there's a listing of the folks that won, as well as links to the issue itself that you can read more about those individuals.
And if I'm remembering correctly, if people go to rmmagazine.com/contribute, they can find the editorial guidelines and reach out to you if they have pitches, right?
That is 100% correct.
Absolutely. There's also our topics pages if you want any kind of subject-specific coverage. It's a great way to navigate within the website. So if you want to see, natural disaster things don't necessarily vary that wildly year to year when it comes to preparation or best practices. So if you're looking for any of that content, that's also a great place to look.
And keep in mind what Hilary said about she's going to be reading these. So the question is, so what?
Exactly. So what?
Because she's nicer about it than that. She's rolling her eyes.
I am nicer about it.
She's much more diplomatic.
In writing, she's nicer about it.
Yes.
Much more diplomatic.
But
if you're submitting something, ask yourself that. So what? Why should somebody care to read this?
Right.
Why should it just be more than just me writing for myself? So what?
And look at her Hurricane Outlook. Look at the Red Teaming article for good examples of what we're looking for. The Hurricane Outlook is far more in depth than what we're expecting from the typical outside contributor, but it should give you a good starting point.
Indeed. Yes.
Well, I'd like to congratulate you on another wonderful quarterly edition of RIMS Risk Management Magazine.
Thank you.
I look forward to seeing you at upcoming RIMS events. And thank you so much for joining us.
Special thanks again to Morgan O'Rourke and Hilary Tuttle for joining us here on RIMScast again. The Q2 edition of RIMS Risk Management Magazine is now available on rmmagazine.com. Remember, if you want to contribute, check out rmmagazine.com/contribute for the editorial guidelines. You can reach out to Morgan and Hilary and our editor, Jennifer Post, there as well. We're certainly going to have them back for our year in review episode of RIMScast. But if and when major news happens, or I just run out of guests, they might just come back and rejoin us here on RIMScast. And now I want to speak about a topic near and dear to my heart, sponsorships. You can sponsor a RIMScast episode either on our publicly facing weekly show, that's this show, or with a dedicated episode. RIMScast has produced special episodes for JB Boda, The Hartford, Alliant, Zurich, Highwire, AXA XL, Prudent Insurance Brokers, High Trust, and Aon. Links to sponsored episodes are on our show notes. RIMScast has a global audience comprised of risk and insurance professionals, legal professionals, students, business leaders, C-suite executives, and more. Let's collaborate and help you reach them. Contact pd@rims.org for more information. Let's talk about RIMS membership, folks. Become a RIMS member and get access to the tools, thought leadership, and network you need to succeed. Visit rims.org/membership or email membershipdept@rims.org for more information. And let's also talk about risk knowledge. This is the RIMS searchable content library that provides relevant information for today's risk professionals. Available materials include RIMS executive reports, survey findings, contributed articles, industry research, benchmarking data, and more. For the best reporting on the profession of risk management, check out Risk Management Magazine. This is the Society's official quarterly digital publication. It is written and published by the best minds in risk management. My name is Justin Smulison, Business Content Manager here at RIMS. Please remember to subscribe to RIMScast on your favorite podcasting app. Email us at content@rims.org. Practice good risk management, stay safe, and thank you again for your continued support.